Hello, everybody. Anybody who is watching remotely now or as a recording, it is 4:32 p.m. on August 12th, 2024. My name is Sarah Bryden. I am the chair of the Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee for the Portland, Maine Board of Education, and we are kicking off a Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee meeting. Let's see. We have with us, I'm here. We also have committee member, board member Opperman. Board member Figdor will not be attending, and board member Noor will be joining us shortly. And then we have several esteemed members of our staff. We have Dr. Scallon, the superintendent. We have Helene DiBartolomeo, Sarah Warren, and Jennifer Slabbinck. Jennifer, could you just super quickly pronounce your name so that I don't get it wrong ever again?
No, that was actually pretty good. It's Slabbinck.
Slabbinck. Okay. Thank you so much. And if I get it wrong, do tell me. Okay. So we are, we are going to go over a number of agenda items. First, before I sort of list out the agenda, so before I hand things over to our staff members here to go through the information, I'm going to just sort of give folks an overview of what the topics will be. Before I do that, I'm going to cover a quick housekeeping item. So as I said, it's 4:30 p.m. on Monday, August 12th, and we're starting our meeting. This is the last meeting that's going to be starting at 4:30. Starting next month, we're moving to a 6 o'clock start. There were some folks in the community who were having a tough time joining, and there's never a good time for everybody. But we tried the 4:30 for a little while, and we're going to move to 6 o'clock, and hopefully that will help some folks. So with that housekeeping item out of the way, in terms of topics for what you can expect to hear discussed today, we are going to have an introduction of Jennifer Slabbinck. We're going to talk about some staffing adjustments for fiscal year 25, and that's within the purview of the personnel part of our committee. In terms of finance, we're going to talk about some budget adjustments and an update on Maine PERS. Let's see, and we are going to talk about sort of an overarching plan for the year ahead, the academic year ahead, committee meetings that we're going to be having and what we will be covering across that sort of arc of upcoming meetings. So with that all out of the way, I'm also going to see if we have anybody who is attending the meeting who might want to give public comment. I'm seeing nobody in that bucket. So I will, and Board Chair Lentz has joined us as well. Welcome. Okay, so Dr. Scallon, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off the topics that I briefly described.
Yes, thank you. We are excited to start off our finance, HR operations, our sort of catch-all committee meeting this year. As you fondly got us started on last year, every meeting, every day is a budget meeting, but we're excited to have this also be a committee that really does talk about HR and operations as well. And so as we'll get to at the end of the meeting, really looking at our calendar for the year and making sure that we are really covering all of those topics throughout the year. This year, we're excited that we are joined by Jennifer Slabbinck, who is going to introduce herself here in a minute. She comes to us with a background in both HR as well as in school leadership. And so being able to wear hat of both what is HR content knowledge as well as how that intersects with being a school leader is just absolutely essential. And so really excited to welcome her to the team and to have her joining this committee. And then continuing the leadership with Helene DiBartolomeo, who joined us last year and really knows finance from both a public entity end as well as specifically school. And so having her dig in and be able to provide an update of both where we're at on the financial side as we start the year, but also on the critical work we're doing with Maine PERS. As you know, last year we started around payroll and making sure that we were all set on payroll, and then we dug into the budget and the financial pieces. And in the second half of the year, I've been doing a lot of work around Maine PERS and making sure that our reporting is right and getting caught up there. And so we're going to provide a pretty in-depth report about where we're at there. And so you will get sort of an in-depth look at exactly where we're at. And the key there is just the amount of work that has really gone in to that. And so you will see the thousands of records that Helene and her team have touched, and just the amount of work that has gone in there. And then Sarah Warren is here as well, supporting. We'll have less of a role this meeting, but recognizing that we'll be pulling in some of the equity work in particular and how it intersects with this committee. We'll be talking about that in the overall flow of work. With that in mind, one of the things that we're really going to have a focus on this year as a staff is around how our senior leadership partners with the board on committee work. And so you will see even more of our senior leaders, staff, taking a lead in committee work in partnership with the board. And so while I'm doing a little bit of talking here on the front end, you will really hear from Jennifer, Helene, and Sarah at points, but also Barrett and others throughout this year. And so just really excited to get this started as our first committee of the year. And with that in mind, I think Helene's going to pull up our slides and share them, and Jennifer is going to get us started. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you to the board and my colleagues. I'm really excited to be here and joining you for this first meeting of the Finance, HR, and Operations Committee for the 24-25 school year. So just a little bit of my background. Thank you, Ryan. He touched on it a little bit. My name is Jennifer Slabbinck, and I am new to Portland Public Schools, not new to Maine, but still pretty new to Maine. As Ryan said, I do have a background in school leadership and district leadership. This is my 23rd year in education, 16th year in administration, and that has varied. I started classroom teaching at the elementary school level, moved to the middle school level, and then moved into district administration for Los Angeles Unified School Districts, for Glendale Unified School District, and for Culver City Unified School District, all in California. And in those roles, I supported gifted and talented programs, magnet programs, language immersion programs, and I was an assistant principal and then an assistant superintendent for human resources before gathering my family together and relocating to Maine. We got here a couple of years ago in 2022. In my role, both as a principal and assistant superintendent, I've served on a variety of negotiations teams to include serving as chief negotiator. Have done a lot of work with implementation of system structures, looking at things like as simple as taking a department and going from doing all of our work on typewriters to getting it all digitized and coming into the modern day and age. And really believe firmly in our work in HR being about employee growth, employee development, working to support our employees to be the best that they can be in their roles and giving them what they need to be successful in that. So all of those experiences, and I think, as Ryan said, having been a school leader recently here in Maine as well, all of those things are important and inform the decisions that I make. And of course, at the end of the day, what really informs the decisions I make in human resources are the students that we serve. Never forgetting that. It's always good to go out and visit the sites and be reminded that that's ultimately why we're all here. So that's a little bit about me. And I don't know, I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has anything specific. Otherwise, I'm ready to move on into what I've learned in my several weeks here in Portland.
Chair, if I can suggest, just for the good of the presentation, I would suggest that we do questions at 2 points. I would suggest that we do it after the HR and finance have gone. They go together. And so I would do it after both Helene and Jennifer have gone, and then again after the discussion of sort of the arc of the year.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll just quickly say, welcome, Jennifer. So excited, glad you're here. Thank you for that great summary of what has brought you to this point in your career. And I'm really excited to hear what you've learned so far. All right.
Well, then we will move forward. So I've been in HR, it's 5 weeks. This might be my 6th week, I think. And it's been great. I've learned a lot. It's been a steep learning curve coming into a new district and getting acclimated. I've had a lot of questions for a lot of people, but I've really enjoyed my time and kind of getting to look through and see where we're at and where we need to go. The first thing I have on here is my bullet point is that we're reviewing our systems and our structures. We're looking for opportunities to revise, update, and grow. There are definitely some areas for growth. For example, looking at things like our personnel files and sort of what that has looked like over time and maintenance of those files. You may be aware that there was a point at which those files were moved and digitized and scanned. And then I would say during COVID, it appears that our maintenance of those files was not all that we would want it to be. So we are taking some time to look at what our structures need to be so that we can clean that up, get all of the data that we need into those personnel files and maintain them appropriately moving forward. So that's one example of something that has been a discovery and we're on the path to having a solution for. Also looking at our standard operating procedures and looking for opportunities to make sure we're clearly articulating to all of our employees what they need, how they need to go about doing their work as it relates to HR. So, for example, should someone have a workers' comp claim or be looking to file for FMLA, we are looking to create those documents, revise those documents to make sure that we are providing clarity to our employees. And then we're also working on our SOPs internally so that we can ensure consistency of practice within our HR department so that we have 3 generalists. We want to ensure that all 3 of them are doing things in lockstep fashion so that we don't have variances that can create a lack of clarity. We're spending a lot of time. I spent this weekend going through our staffing, our teacher staffing specifically at this point to make sure we're getting all of their step and column, lane and step work ready for next year. So we are reviewing those lists. We're taking a look at things like certifications and licensures. We've definitely got a couple of places where we are out of compliance. So we're working to make sure we're tightening those things up. And where we have people that aren't appropriately certified, we're taking steps to support those employees in achieving their appropriate certification and making sure that we are staffed as we need to be. And again, just making sure that we're collecting information on our different employee certifications, licensures, and when those things expire so that we can support employees in making sure that they're renewed in a timely fashion and up to date. And that's part of the professional growth pathways as well. I've spent some good time with Barrett Wilkinson and Julia Hazel talking about the pathways that we have for our different employees, for our BIPOC employees, and looking for opportunities for growth and growing within our school department. We're, of course, preparing for negotiations. We've already started negotiations with our Portland Adult Ed, which is actually going to be a new contract. It's an initial. And then, of course, we'll negotiate with our teachers union as well this year with PEA. And then just lots of back and forth working with the finance department to make sure we've got consistency of practice so that when we are putting data in on the HR end, then when it transfers over to the finance end for people to get paid, we want to make sure that all of those systems are tight and all those no open loops. We don't want anything that anyone can jump through. We want to make sure people are getting paid appropriately and on time. So those are just some of the things that we've been working on in the time that I've been here. Other things that aren't on the slides, but those are some of the big picture highlights. And then looking at staffing adjustments. So obviously, as we move into a new school year, we're constantly reviewing what our current enrollment looks like. And there's variation up and down. And so as we look at those trends and student identifications, sometimes we have to make adjustments. So these are just some of the adjustments that we've had to make so far. And there's more coming in, I know. So just to kind of make you aware, we have added 7 ed techs to our special ed allocation. This is because of, again, an increase in enrollment as well as reviewing students' IEPs and identifications and what the needs are that are coming through those IEPs with students that are transferring into our district or entering into the pre-K and kindergarten realm. We have also added 5 ed techs and 1 teacher to our pre-K programming, likewise, due to some increases in enrollment. And I know I'm not going to really talk about the funding aspects of this. I'm going to that's part of Helene. She'll get into the granular detail about the fiscal aspects, but do know that those are all positions that have been added due to those shifts in enrollment and student identification needs. And then we've also had some shifting of teacher positions. So these are positions that were budgeted at one site, but due to declining enrollment at the site where they were budgeted, increasing enrollment at another site, those positions, those vacancies have just been shifted. So we have shifted one position from Ocean to Talbot and one position from Reiki to Lyseth. All right. And then as we look at where some of our current vacancies, I'll talk a little to the bullet points, and then I'll ask maybe Helene to open that link. But of course, we have hard to fill positions. I said this at the board meeting. These are not unique to Portland Public Schools. These are positions that we see trends both at the state level and at the national level in filling some of these positions. But in particular, some of our harder to fill positions that we're really working on coming up with solutions for are our ed techs, particularly for special education and pre-K, and drivers for transportation. And then some of our leadership positions, specifically with special education, we have 2 director vacancies right now. Sarah Warren and I were just speaking earlier today about using one of our partners to put together a job fair, whether we'll do that internally or use one of our partners, and kind of talking about what makes the most sense to get some hiring on the spot job fairs together so that we can be bringing people in through the doors that we know are ready to sign on with us and get started the next day. And we also talked about some of the outreach that we'll be doing to try to fill those special education director positions, and to find, because we know that the people who are probably the best people for these positions are in seat somewhere else right now. We may have to do a little going out and actively seeking some of these individuals. So we are hopeful that that will be successful. And then, Helene, if you're able to click on that current vacancies. Oh, no, I should have known. I will work on giving her access while I talk about it a little bit. So we have currently, I think when I presented to the board, we were thinking and it was accurate at the time when I first pulled the data, we had in the range of 50 vacancies. And subsequently, obviously, we've had some more resignations, which happens. This is a time of year, unfortunately, where that's, again, pretty typical. And a couple of the positions that were on frontline are multiple positions. So it might be posted as one position, but it's actually multiple positions. So don't let that number daunt you. It's not exactly that high, but currently on the books, we have 87 vacancies. Of those vacancies, 7 of them are long-term sub positions that they're not as imminent. So we're working to fill them, but they're not as imminent as some of our school year positions that we really are looking to try to get filled. So that's about 7 of them. That takes it down to 80. And then out of those 80, I just was speaking with our HR team about 30 minutes ago, and 16 out of those 80 positions are in some process of being offered. Either the call has been made and we're waiting to hear back, or the paperwork just got signed off here close to the end of the day today. So that was really promising to know that gets us down into the mid 60 range. And you can see on this tab sort of where those vacancies are. I will make note that these are not all full-time positions. So for a great example is where you see Cliff Peaks Island, that's a 0.25 custodial position out on Cliff. So the number looks like 87. It's not all FTEs, but it's still 87 people that we're looking for, 87 of the right people ultimately that we're looking for, less those 16 or so that we've already found the right people and have made those offers or are in process of doing that. There's another tab if it's helpful to see specifically what those positions are. There we go. So on the school tracking, as I mentioned, you've got that 0.25 custodial, and you can see the breakdown by school of what some of these other positions are. You'll see those special ed techs at the sites. Some of these are administrative positions, such as the special education director positions that I mentioned earlier. There's some positions in payroll that I know Helene is eagerly working to get filled. And so the positions are really all across the district. And as you can see across classrooms, admin, other vacancies like psychologists, social workers, ed techs, long-term subs. So we've got our work cut out for us in terms of continuing to get these positions filled. And I do know our contingency plan, certainly with relation to our special ed techs, which I know this was something the district did last year as well, which was we do have an agency that we can contract with to fill those positions as necessary so that we don't go into the year with those special ed tech roles vacant, which is critical for the needs of our students with IEPs. So that's an update of what I've got for our current vacancies. And I think that is it for me. And I know you'll probably have lots of questions when it's time.
Good evening. So I wanted to go ahead and start out by giving the committee an update on our title funding. I know the last time we spoke, we talked about the deficit that we had when we compared budget to what our initial allocation was. So we did receive our final allocation for the title funding. So what I did here is I provided you what the board originally approved for title funding and what the final allocations were. So as you can see, we originally had a 20%, we were about 20% down to budget, but now we're only about 13%. The good news is that we also received some information from the DOE that advised us that we will be allowed to, normally the restriction for carry forward is limited to 15%, but we were told by the DOE that they are not limiting the carry forward to 15% this year for Title I, which is the biggest shortfall that we currently have. So based on where we are, I'm still working with the title director, Gail Cressy. You met her. We had a small meeting with her a couple of weeks ago. We're working on tying up what that carry forward number is going to look like, and I'm pretty hopeful that it will cover that deficit that we're looking at currently. In regards to the impacts, financial impacts for those additional positions that Jennifer was speaking about earlier, the special ed techs that we are adding are a total of 7. And as she had mentioned earlier, this was due to the students coming into kindergarten with these IEPs that require these one-to-one. The approximate cost currently is about $448,000. This cost is based on us using the same perspective, the same estimates that we used when we did budgets. If you remember, when we decided that we were going to budget for allocations of employees, we did an average-based cost. So when we use that average-based cost for the ed techs, we're looking at about a $448,000 addition to our budget. Also, in regards to the special ed tech positions, the 5 positions that are needed and the 1 teacher position that pre-K is looking for, that is about $480,000. But we were advised by Alyssa, our director of pre-K. She is working with CDS in order to make sure that funding comes reimbursed to us from CDS. So that won't have an impact to our general fund as the way the special ed techs will. And then the last piece that we just wanted to go ahead and add to this, there was some additional need at for the special ed department. There was a request to add a compliance training specialist. As you know, when we did a reorganization of especially our central office, we were moving a lot of our centrally located work out to the school sites. But there was a need for their special ed department to be able to have a specialist in order to go ahead and make sure that we are able to train the coordinators at the sites that will be managing this and making sure that we have that support and that there's an understanding of how all of the compliance is going to work moving forward. So there was a request from our special ed department to include a specialist. The other addition was to add 2 OTs, occupational therapists. Currently, right now, these positions were budgeted under contracted services, but because of the need that is growing, we're realizing that it would be more efficient for us to hire these employees internally so that we could know that, because it's going to be just a continuing growth of need moving forward as we're starting to see the change of the students that are coming influx into the PPS. So again, in regards to the financial impact, as I discussed, the impact that will be on the general fund will be the 7 texts from special ed. And so right now what we're planning on doing is going ahead and monitoring our vacancies in all areas and keeping an eye on our budget overall. As we move through the fiscal year. As you know, again, when we did our budget, everything was based on averages. So we're hoping through some vacancies and attrition from our prior year, and that we will see some type of hopefully cost neutral or be able to somehow make up the difference. We're also looking at being able to take these additional ed techs and the OT positions and getting reimbursed through Maine Care billing. As you know, that was something that we're kicking off this year. That was something that was added into the budget to allow for us. And we do have an employee who is working in that position now that is going to start managing that Maine Care billing for us. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the 5 special ed techs and the 1 teacher for pre-K is all going to be reimbursed through CDS. Ryan, did you want to stop at this point now then and see if there's any questions about the additional positions and the financial impact?
I think that makes sense. And then we'll talk Maine PERS.
Yeah, and thank you. I also wanted to just acknowledge that board member Noor has joined us. So I have a few questions, but I'm going to let others go first if you have any questions.
Not yet.
Okay. Board Chair Lentz, go ahead.
And is it okay to go back to Jennifer's presentation as well in this? Okay, great. I really appreciate this information. I'm curious, kind of in your first 6 weeks, and you may not have an opinion on this yet, but in terms of staffing levels within the HR department, how are you finding it? And, in addition to these, things that you mentioned, as a department, are there things that you are working with as a department or trying to build within the department?
Sure. So,
Oh, and actually, Jennifer, let me give you a little bit more context to that question, because the last 2 budget cycles, there's been a lot of conversation about the staffing levels within the HR department. So I'm curious kind of what your observations are.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that in terms of the numbers of overall vacancies at the district level, unfortunately, I don't think it's necessarily uncommon. I would definitely like to see us in better shape than we are. The last minute resignations that sort of have been coming in the last week or two are impacting us quite a bit. So all we can do is get those jobs as quickly as possible posted. And like I say, try to have some sort of backup plan, whether it's with special ed, with some sort of contracted services, putting together some job fairs and looking for opportunities to do that on the spot hiring. There's some really great ways that we can get people in the door and meet them right away and be able to move forward quickly. So that's what we're looking forward to doing. I think it's always hard. Staffing is always difficult, especially if there are any uncertainties around budget, because often you're districts are often kind of holding on posting positions until they know that the budget is going to be secure and tight, right? If there's budget dependent positions. And so, sometimes that can delay posting of positions and movement on getting those positions filled. So I wasn't here enough in the spring to know, but I suspect from some of the positions and when I saw them go up for initial posting, I suspect that that's also part of the delay is, just knowing that we can't hire unless we know we have the money to hire, right? So I hope that answered part of the question. I'm trying to make sure I get to all of your questions. In terms of what things are looking like in HR, is your question specifically about the HR staff and the work that we have to do in that department? Sure. I think I will be thoughtful in answering this, which is to say that I don't know of anyone who wouldn't say that like more people can be helpful. But I also think in the here and now, what I'm really trying to look at is for opportunities for efficiency. And so what I've told the HR team is this is not a ding on anybody in particular. I think it's a really strong team. There's some amazing people sitting at those desks in there, and I've really gotten to know all of them and enjoy working with all of them. So it's not anything that I think anyone is doing in particular, but it is about looking at our overall practices and procedures and looking for where are there opportunities to just do things maybe in a more streamlined fashion so that we can save ourselves time through that process and have that time for other work. Right now, what we're doing as a team is I've been having my meetings with Ryan and kind of looking at some big picture projects of what we need to do to get some things cleaned up in human resources. And likewise, I've been meeting with the team and asking them similarly, what are some things that they can take on, some bigger picture projects that they can take on to help us get to a place where some of the things that are getting in our way this year won't get in our way next year because we'll be settled. So something as I don't want to say it's as easy, but something as sitting and going through and making sure we've got the right lane and step for every single teacher. We negotiate a contract this year. Hopefully it goes smoothly and we have a new salary schedule, and really we can project out what those salaries will be for individuals 3 years out. And I told the team today, my goal is that we do that kind of work. And then it's just about going in and dealing with any exceptions, people who take leaves or who have a lane change. But everyone else, when you're looking at 800 teachers, if 600 of them are pretty steady moving through that table and you're only having to correct a couple hundred every year, it's less cumbersome than doing all 800 at once. So we're just kind of digging into all of those conversations. And yeah, it's all about looking for efficiencies. How can we do this work smarter, faster, better, but accurately? Because we don't want to be inaccurate either. Did that answer what you were looking for?
Yeah, thanks so much. And just, as things progress, I just welcome observations like that because it really does help the board understand kind of, where our investments need to go in the budget. So just, I appreciate all the work you're doing around those.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing other hands from the committee members. So I have a couple. So actually, my first question, I'll do a follow-up to this last bit of conversation, Jennifer. I'm curious about, so you were talking about reviewing to make sure that all 800 teachers are in the exact right lane and step. I'm curious about what you're finding in terms of what percentage ballpark, like how far off the mark are things currently?
Honestly, the discrepancies that I'm finding right now are more things that I think are related to just our process in HR. So as an example, we were reviewing some things today and I said to the team, I see this current employee had some sort of a change, a transfer, or some sort of change in their position, right? They transferred sites or adjusted their position going forward. That's already been entered in the system, which is really great. Mm-hmm. And it was already entered in the system with the new salary. So I just wanted to be really aware of making sure, not that the employee, I'm sure the employee would appreciate the double bump, but I wanted to make sure that I was being cognizant of they already had that salary increase. It's already in the system. But my work with the team was how do we make sure that we don't inadvertently, do the wrong salary. Yep. And in either direction, right? Obviously, if we have people who have discrepancies, our goal is to get those contracts out. I think that the contracts, from what I can tell over the past several years, some years they've gone out, some years they haven't. There are some people who, are, when I was trying to read the legal language and the DOE language to better understand the contracts today. And I think there's variances, but they don't need to go out necessarily every single year. But I think what we've had typically done as practice is sending those continuing contracts out every year. So we have some, people who've had inquiries, and I'm finding gaps in the years of where we have the contracts. And I think that there have been some assumptions around that. So our plan is to get those out. In fact, we're meeting on some timelines today to get those contracts out in September once all of those lane and step changes have been made. And we will provide an opportunity for employees at that time, if they feel that there's an error, there'll be a way for them to communicate that to us so that we can look back in and dig a little deeper just to make sure that where we have people matches with what the data that we see around their different changes across years.
Okay, super. My other question for you, Jennifer, has to do with on the slide where you were talking about licensure compliance gaps. I'm curious about what you would estimate for a realistic timeline to get that resolved and addressed.
It varies. So I think it depends on where we're out of compliance. So some things are really quick and easy solutions where we can put in for a waiver or an emergency. There's a handful of folks where it's not easy because it's hard conversations with people, but we've got a handful of situations where maybe someone's in a position they're not certified for. We can make some adjustments to some of those. So as an example, if we might have someone placed in an EdTech 3 role, but their certification isn't current as an EdTech 3. So they're going to have some work to do to renew that certification. We can adjust their role within the EdTech world to match the certifications that they do have while they do that work to updating their paperwork for us. So there are ways that we can kind of work through that with people. And again, a lot of shout out to Barrett and to Julia, because and to Beth as well, that have really been doing the work of supporting staff, tracking those over time, and supporting staff who are taking steps toward certification. So I would like to say that's something I don't want to be having this conversation going into 25, 26. Yep. So, my goal would be to get all of those things cleaned up, during the course of this year. Obviously, there are if we're able to get waivers and emergencies, those are people that will set to the side for me for right now. And where we have people where if there's any significant gaps, if we have someone who's about to be in a classroom, those are where we're going to start our focus and make sure that we have people who are appropriately certified working with our students.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then I have two quick questions I think they're quick questions for Helene. So let's see. So my first question has to do with the reimbursements, the CDS and Maine Care reimbursements. I'm curious about, and this might be a premature question, but I'm curious about whether the reimbursement rate is likely to be are we going to get 100% of what we're spending reimbursed from those two entities, or would it be a partial reimbursement?
For the CDS piece, I can tell you with confidence that it will be at 100%.
Okay.
In regards to what we get back from Maine Care, it's just going to be a matter of, I guess, the timing and making sure that we have all the appropriate paperwork signed. As you remember, when we were discussing and determining whether or not this is a position we wanted to have at the district, we were focused on advising the board that this Maine Care billing is a much bigger situation, and we weren't sure when the changes were going to be made from the state in regards to them making some revisions to the process. So I'm not quite sure how that'll look when we do go and request for reimbursement on this. But I feel pretty confident that if we're adding the employees because of the IEPs and we have all of our paperwork and everything is lined correctly, I don't see why we wouldn't get that reimbursement from Maine Care.
Okay. Thank you. And then my other question has to do with the MDOE carry forward on the title funds. So it has historically been capped at 15%. I'm curious, and I think I know the answer just from the context clues of what you already said, but I want to confirm that so the there's no, what we're looking at is no restriction of 15% for carry forward. I want to just confirm that there isn't a higher restriction instead. And if there is, it would allow for us to carry forward what we need in order to accomplish what you described. So it's not like, 16%.
Right. Well, normally what ends up happening is every 3 years we have the ability to request up to 15%. But we did get a notification from the DOE that said there was no restriction on what that carry forward is. I have a feeling that what have happened is what I'm thinking is possibly that there was a lot less spending overall with the state than anticipated. So that's my best guess as to why they opened up the percentage from the normal 15% to just an open-ended. They were not specific on what the cap was on the restriction. They just said it was not restricted to 15%.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go to Board Chair Lentz and then Board Member Opperman after that.
While I'm excited that we can carry over 15% from last year, does this mean then that the budget implications for the next year's budget is that we have to reduce by 15% because that money won't be coming? Additionally, like, we'll have it covered for this school year, but then the next year we're probably looking, because we don't, I mean, let me walk that back. Like, it's unlikely that our title funding will go up for the next school year. Right. So we're already within title funding. We should probably have to anticipate a 15% deduction, right? Or that's going to have to come from someplace else for whatever those things are that are built into the budget. Is that right?
Right. So what you're So what you're saying is, because we're using a gap fill from a previous year in order to catch us up on our budget, what's the anticipation for the years to follow? Again, we'll just have to be more cognizant in the future of what that budget looks like and budget accordingly. This is the first year that when we budgeted, we brought, and Ryan and I took a lot of administrative positions that were previously being budgeted in the title funds, and we took those all out and made sure that we were only capturing staffing that had a direct impact on students. So again, because we made that shift, I do feel confident that we should have enough funding to cover the difference. We'll just have to make sure that we're a little bit more strategic when we go into the next year about what we anticipate versus how many title positions we end up budgeting for title. And again, if you remember, the capture when we did it was also based on an average, and that's why I'm working with the grants director so that we can, now that the dust is settling, we've actually been working with determining who are the exact employees that will be in this position to see if there is even, because we're over budget doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to have enough budget for what we budgeted, if that makes sense. Because we were basing everything on an average and not necessarily the actual employees that will be in the budget. Because as you know, with title funds, they're very specific as who is allowed to be in there and what we're allowed to capture with the budget within the title funding.
Okay, Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have one brief, real short question just for clarity. The compliance coordinator trainer person, is that a PPS employee on the long term, or is that someone with outside contract?
That will be an internal employee that we currently have. That would be someone who is already has it would be someone who already currently understands how everything works within our school district.
And so that's just a shifting of a few responsibilities, and that person will stay and be around for future training.
Can I jump in here real quick? Sorry, Helene, can I just jump in real quick? That is a person that was formerly here. that was not continuing here, but because of the challenges with the network SPED coordinator, we were able to retain their services on a 1 year only to provide sort of gap coverage, as I think of it, in this time. And so it's a 1 year only piece for this. So they're very familiar with the district, and to be able to provide support, we're using and we're able to use savings from not having the network piece. And so it's long-term budget neutral, but it is able to provide capacity during this time.
Good. Thank you. The occupational therapy, though, is a planned long-term add. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Because of the additional needs of the school district.
I just want to make sure I was, I wrote something down and I checked looking at my handwriting, just making sure I had that correct.
Yeah, we're just trying to shift away from contracted services and use our own employees, have employees on hand so that we have more capacity with them when they're an employee.
Okay.
Dr. Opperman, just to be like, Helene's 100% right. And just, I want to be clear from the ask that you have. It is a add in terms of FTEs. It is not an add in terms of budget.
Right, because you have the money from somewhere else. Okay. The one thing that I'm thinking long-term, budgeting long-term strategic plan as we go through and get my comment to both Helene and Jennifer, I see really good organizational structure coming in, and I'm feeling very comfortable and confident in what's happening going forward, which is a new feeling, and I like it. So then it gets, when you get things going and get them settled, and which in the next year or so, then you start thinking innovatively. And so, I'm just, will you be thinking innovatively? It's
that question to me, Jennifer.
Both of you. What do you see in the future that you would think? You probably need people to do the job. Period. Yes. Yeah, and all that. But I'm just saying. Well, what if, as we move forward particularly in staffing and academic staffing, I'm thinking more. What might be going forward financially, innovatively, and so is that in the back of the mind? I'm just putting something out there because, getting excited about all these options of possibilities of things we could do that someone might bring up. But if we're going to be kind of lockstep for a while, it'd be good to know that.
So, Board Member Opperman, I want to make sure that I am understanding what you're saying. I think I'm hearing that you're really excited, and you want to make sure that everybody is able to harness the collective excitement and do really great work in line with our strategic plan. Are
And I'm also on the policy committee. So if something comes up on the policy committee that's a little bit different, where is it going? Are you all going to be is our committee, the Finance and Personnel Committee, going to be as excited? So I guess I'm
excited. So.
I'm glad you are, because you're here. So I just wanted, I wanted to make that comment. And it's probably a nasty thing to ask you to make any statements at this point. But
are you actually looking for answers, or can we also just noting that it's 5:21? Are you?
Well, I guess my question is, Jennifer, Helene, do you see us trying to be in lockstep for 2 more years in order to get caught up? Or do you see us being caught up, by this next budget season or the following budget season? That's my question.
I'll take it. I would say that This is going to be a multi-year necessity in order to get us to a good place. Dr. Scallon and I have uncovered a lot of financial situations that are requiring a lot of work behind the scenes that in order to get us into a place where I feel will get us to a point where employees will feel confident about the district again. But, we're obviously not, going to give up till we get there. But the root of a lot of the issues are pretty significantly deep and are time consuming when it comes to the financial piece of it. But I think that with all the changes that are happening, that there is the constant motivation to continue moving the district forward. I think everything will start happening naturally, where I think will provide more positive result to the school district overall, and will allow us to be in a better place where maybe it won't be so difficult for Jennifer to be able to go out and recruit those vacancies in the future. It's just a cycle we'll have to just get there first, and line up all of our clean up all of our past issues and get our employees to feel confident about what's happening with the district.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear of sorts. I don't know if Jennifer, you're so new. I don't want to ask you to make a statement, but you sound like you were pretty much in the same piece.
Yeah, I would just say I don't, to your question, I don't know that this is about that these things have to be mutually exclusive, right? So I think that the lockstep piece to me feels like we need to get into lockstep and be that way for the rest of Portland Public Schools' existence. The lockstep piece is what is going to keep the mishaps and the miscommunications and misunderstandings and mispayments, right? All those things. The lockstep and that focus is what's going to keep those things from happening. Or if something does happen, it'll be an anomaly that can be resolved quickly. But I think that at the same time as we're doing that work, I think that there's also got to be room, to your point, for that enthusiasm and that excitement. And so, I see some of the work that I know I'm eager to join in on, which is sort of that work around recruitment and around creating pathways and partnerships so that we have opportunities for our current staff to grow from within, and then also to be able to cast as wide a net as we need to in terms of hiring, so that we are bringing a diverse workforce to Portland, so that we have a staff that our students can look at and see themselves represented in our staff. So I think that's something that I feel very passionately about, and I'd love to be able to spend some time on eventually. Right now, I'm going to work on files and records. And like Helene said, I think that's a multi-year project, but I don't think that it means that we're only doing the lockstep stuff without some of the fun at the same time.
Okay, that's right. Thank you so much, both of you.
I so appreciate both the candor and the glimmers of hope. So thank you to both of you. I recognize in just a couple minutes, we're going to move on with the rest of the agenda, but I have a super quick follow-up question about the compliance training specialist role, the person who's going to be with us for 1 year, helping us with that content area. I am looking to confirm, hopefully it's a quick confirm, that's going to tie in with the SOP work that Sarah Warren has spoken about in previous board meetings. I just want to, is that the type of thing, the nature of that work, is that the type of thing that's going to get codified in SOPs moving forward?
I can speak to this one. So this person, a big part of what they're doing initially is helping us to train the new special education coordinators.
Okay.
Because those folks are going to be really, upfront dealing with the day-to-day of compliance stuff. But yes, the idea is to codify these things as standard operating procedures at the same time that we're sort of providing the training and support. I think probably it won't even end up being the entire year that it takes. A lot of that will be front-loaded at the start of the school year. Mm-hmm. Or just before, because that training will happen. I don't have the date in front of me right now, but it's coming up, I think, next week. It's very soon that we're starting the training.
Okay, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that part of the effort is going to be writing it down. So hooray. Thank you. Okay. All right, 5:27. We have 33 minutes left. Dr. Scallon, I'll turn it back over to you.
It's actually going to Helene again.
Okay.
The final piece that we wanted to, or that I was going to bring up for discussion is giving the committee an update on our work with Maine PERS and Barry Dunn and the MEA, PEA, and what we've been doing. We continue to work, meet with them weekly as a whole. All of those people, or all of those groups that you see in our header, in that header, we do meet weekly, and we review what we've done and what we've gone over so far. So, if you remember, we've always discussed things in 3 buckets of work that we're working on. This is a piece of what we're working on in the first bucket. The first bucket is the July 2022 to the March 2023 information. This was the data that was previously submitted to Maine PERS. As you remember, the superintendent has always talked about, like, before we can get started on our current situation, we wanted to have a clean spot. So we went back and we reviewed all of our information. This chart here is a summary of what we've done so far. So what we've been doing is the finance department, Barry Dunn and Maine PERS, we're meeting at least once a week at a minimum, and having work sessions where we're literally online for 2 to 3 hours at a time and reviewing. We're down to, on the non-teacher plan, we're down to, as you can see here, it says pending 8.8. We're down to about 42 issues that we're still trying to clean up. So, as you can see, we started out with a very high amount of variances, and we so far have resolved on the PLD is your non-teacher plan. We started out with 220 variances, and then we ended up with, now we're down to 42. These are the deep ones where we were having to do a lot of historical information on reviewing. What also is time consuming about this process is that we're actually not only just looking at this small phase of what's happening, but in some instances, there are situations that will completely change the outlook or how the information was originally submitted to Maine PERS, which can actually is going to, change data moving forward as well. So that's why we're trying to take the data that we're looking at it and trying to make sure that we're only looking at it once. So that way it will flow into the next bucket of information that we're looking at. So the other set of information that we're looking at from July of 22 to March of 23 was what we call set plan. The set plan is the teacher's plan. As you can see, so far from what has been given to Maine PERS, we have about 829 variances that we will have to review. Some of them will be quick and simple reviews, and some will be requiring some deep dive into it. We did also, during our work session, found out that so a lot of some of the information that's creating variances has to do with retro pay. And so what's happening is when we're looking so far back, we're not being able to know what the historical reason for the retro pay is. So we, Maine PERS went to their I guess their kind of committee who's overwatching what's happening here with PPS. And they were, the employees from Maine PERS were given a, normally what happens is if an employee has retro, we have to be able to provide Maine PERS the exact dates that retro covers. So, and that can take a lot of work to try and figure out where that retro information came from. In order to kind of start making this work a little bit faster, Maine PERS actually has given us a reprieve of $250 that says anything under $250 that they will allow us to just go ahead and apply it to the current month that the payment was, they received it in. If it's more than 250, the retro, then we will be required. So that actually had helped bring down our pending list of items that had variances that we needed to resolve. It had brought it down by, I think, by like 16 items initially when we were told that during one of our work sessions. So we're going to finish cleaning up PLD, and then we're going to start working on our teacher plan next. But at the end here, these last two rows, you know, we're not only looking at what was happening in the non-teacher plan and the teacher plan, but we also had to make sure and validate that any employee that was not in Maine PERS to begin with technically shouldn't have been in Maine PERS, and we had to validate that as well. So we just wanted you to be aware and see that we were also validating that as well. So we weren't only looking at what was reported, but we were making sure that what was not reported was correctly not reported. So basically, we were looking at every single employee and ensuring that if we were putting someone in a particular plan or not, they were in the right plan on top of that as well. The second bucket of information now that we're also working on is our April 23 to December 23. That's the time frame where we have not actually reported anything to Maine PERS. This is where we've been now just submitting estimated payments to Maine PERS based on what we've been cycling through payroll, but not actually reporting the information to them. This is where we're in that kind of we don't have like a pathway to compare to at this point now. So what Barry Dunn has begun to do is take the data that out of our system and putting it in a format so that so Maine PERS can start entering the information themselves. And so they compiled the data, formatted it, and ensured that the format that they are beginning to use is usable for Maine PERS. They're trying to make sure they're not providing too much information, but but enough, because they're doing this outside of the programming. So they're basically taking the data, all of the pay data, and trying to create what normally would be a program that would create this for us. And knowing now the information that we know from the first bucket of information, make sure that now moving forward, we start reporting this information accurately. We haven't actually started submitting the information yet to Maine PERS, because if you see, it starts in April of 2023, which means that anything changes that we make in the first bucket of information may have cause and effect to this bucket of information. So we're waiting till we finalize and clean up all that data to make sure that we apply that same rule or those same corrections, and we pull it all the way through. And so they're making sure that they're taking notation of any of the changes that we had to do from the first set of information, and that we're applying it to the second set of information so that we're not resubmitting this information in error based on what was set up originally in the system. And then the last bucket of the last bucket that we're working on is our current data, which is when we went into ADP, and that starts from January 24 to current. So as of right now, we're like so far submitted the April 2024 data. We sent it to Maine PERS. They provided us what we needed, what was still missing, what was they were not able to use. So again, because remember, we're creating an actual program out of ADP at this point. So we're trying to work with the programmer from ADP. So that first file went to Maine PERS, and they gave us the information we needed to tweak the file. And then we sent an actual second file for May's data, and there was a few more tweaks we had to make, but we're like on the home front. So this is the last set of tweaks that we have to make, and it's more of a when do we report as part of the employees base pay and when we not report as part of the employee's base pay. And it's going to be different based on whether their employee is a contracted employee, which means their salary, or if they're an hourly employee. And that was something that we just clarified in this last file to make sure that we have the system or the program that ADP is building for us have those lines separated out for us. So as of today, we're working on finalizing that file so that we can actually put that into production. I would say that we should have that teacher file program in production to start using within a week or two the most. So we're really excited about that. The second piece is the PLD file, and the PLD file is again the non-teacher file. A lot of the rules that apply to how we manage the way we look at employees in the teacher plan are very different from the way we manage and look at the way we report for employees in the non-teacher plan. So again, ADP has a file program ready to go. They're making a couple of tweaks before we can go ahead and start pulling data to then have it tested by Maine PERS to tell us what if we have any tweaks to make. I'm feeling more confident about the PLD file. It's not as complicated reporting the non-teacher information as it is the teacher. So I'm feeling pretty confident about that file as well. And I'm hoping that we'll have both files, ADP programs for the teacher and the non-teacher up and running by the end of the month in production so that we can start reporting our actual data to Maine PERS.
Before, Helene, that was a great summary. Can I just hit like a couple of quick high notes on this just to like emphasize a couple of points? Helene, can you go back? So when we started the Maine PERS, right, this was the last piece that we thought of to finish the cleanup from the payroll challenges from the 22-23 school year. The other pieces had been tackled and we could talk through that again, but just for like time's sake, the last piece was to do Maine PERS. It had not been touched. We started by wanting to look at July of 22 through March of 23, with the idea being that we were really trying to create a clear data set to be able to follow all the way through, with the thought being that if we looked at data that was before the payroll challenges happened, so that July through basically like October window, that we'd be able to follow the logic. What we didn't know at the time was that it turned out that there were errors in that data. And that became uncovered as part of this process. And so what we thought was going to start off as a simple exercise actually became a really challenging one. And so as you can see here, right, in the PLD, that's a smaller number of employees. That's our non-teaching staff. That's the left side of the chart, right? A typical month represents between 240 to 290 staff in any month. There were a total of 220 variances noted. The team has worked to clean up 178 of them. They range from things that are very quick to items that have taken up to a couple of hours to research. And by a couple of hours, that includes staff from Barry Dunn, Maine PERS, and our finance team all working together looking at one individual to research and uncover. So while it may be 2 hours, it's a total man hours of 6 or 8 hours to figure out to make sure it's correct. And in some cases, the variance may impact one person across 1 month or multiple months. The set plan is a much bigger, because that's all of our teaching staff and our individuals on the teaching plan, right? And again, you can see that it varies on a much larger number of staff. There's 829 variances noted. You can see there that they're not resolved yet, because one of the issues that has come up is that before we can start to resolve them, Maine PERS needs to research on their end whether or not the issue's actually already been resolved or if it still needs to be corrected. And in some cases, issues were identified in that school year and resolved, but there was no record kept of it being resolved. It was sort of resolved real time or in the next month. And so you'd find a correction, but you wouldn't know about it. And so what's happening here is Maine PERS is doing research in partnership with us. And thank gosh, they're really working with us on this and helping us out. And that there is really this collaboration between Maine PERS, Barry Dunn, the PEA, the MEA, everybody on this, and our finance team to do this hand in hand, to be able to say like, oh, Ryan already has this issue resolved or he needs this issue resolved, but there's a huge amount of labor. And so the Maine PERS team is actually working on that set plan now. And so this is not work that when we went into this, we anticipated needing to do, but we've discovered that we need to do it. And we're taking the time to do it to make sure it's done right. And so that's this first chart. And so then the whole idea was to make sure we knew, is Ryan somebody who's in the set plan and should be in the set plan when we get to new data or should not? And so we can't actually do the new work that April 23 to December 23 where it's not reported until we have that information clarified, because that impacts whether or not Maine PERS should accept the data as right or not. And so that's why there's that pause on this number 2 here on this screen, because we have to make sure that first data is correct, because the way that Maine PERS identifies if there's an error is they sort of look backwards to say, is this correct? And if your past data is incorrect, they can't look back. And so we first have to make sure the past is right to go forward. And so that's why this has taken way more time than we've anticipated, and just very, very appreciative of the partnership and the work that's been ongoing. I'm just going to name the fact, though, that because this was done wrong or in error in many cases the first time, it's also hugely expensive to do this correction in terms of manpower, right? So Helene is spending huge amounts of time. We as a district are spending a huge amount of money with Barry Dunn as contracted to do this work. And we just got to recognize that. And this is why when we talk about the importance of getting these systems right, it's so important so that we don't have to look back. Because while we're talking about 22, 23, we're going to have to go back when we're done with this and look at 21, 22 and 2021 all the way back to probably 19, because we know there's likely errors going back. And so I just want to name that for the committee, that this is likely an ongoing project, that we will be here for a while updating as we continue this work. And so I just want to share that with you so that you know. And I say that not to cause angst, but just the reality of expectations. It's why Helene is working tomorrow to staff up this team and has been working throughout the year to staff it up, is to find people who can also take some of this work off of her plate. It's also just really hard to find those people. So, yeah.
So Dr. Opperman, I see you, and I just want to ask a quick follow-up question to what Dr. Scallon said, and then I'll go to you. So my follow-up question is, the last part you said about needing to go back all the way to 2019. I'm curious, is that in the same category? You were a moment prior, you said we can't do the December 23 forward until we get the stuff that basically the historical has to be accurate before we can start moving ahead. Does that also include going back to 2019?
No.
Okay.
I think the going back, right, is just making sure that we're getting our employees the right information and what they're entitled to.
Okay.
And we know that there are some errors that go back, right? It's not to the same scale.
Okay.
We don't believe. But we do know in working with Maine PERS that they have identified some discrepancies that go back to when when Munis first came online.
Yep.
Which goes back to the 2019 fiscal year. And so we know we want to go back to that, but it doesn't impact our ability to go forward. But we do know there's some cleanup to do.
Thank you for that clarification. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Helene. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have just for clarification, the ADP, HERS, and payroll going into this year is on track. Am I correct?
You said the Maine PERS, the ADP, and the what?
And just their payroll, the payroll period. I mean, are we at this point? We're saying moving forward. Are we out? I wouldn't say starting in a clean sheet, but pretty close to a clean sheet with this bit in the tweaking program. That's making sure everything forward from this point is correct.
That's correct. Yeah. So yeah, because what's yeah.
The teachers, the not teachers can be confident that, boom, going forward, that they should feel confident in what's coming in. They can check it, and there might be an error here and there because there's always an error here and there. But by and large, the ADP is supposedly working now.
For the most part, yes. There will be some hiccups and that's why we started with an April file, because that's when we started realizing the data started coming in cleaner, and we were able to clean up what we had done when we first onboarded ADP into or the data from Munis into ADP. But again, we used the same data that we took out of Munis, which means that our January, February, March, that data is going to need to be a little bit scrubbed because of what we're using the same reporting that Barry Dunn right now is working on in that bucket number 2 of information, where they use that's data that had to be cleaned up and make sure we were reporting it properly and cleanly. We took that same Munis data and put it into ADP. So those first few months, I'm not going to say is it's going to need some cleanup, but that.
What I'm more worried about is September 2024.
Oh yeah, I mean we're now on track for having a better plan with making sure that when we put information into the system, and again, I'm not going to say we're perfect at it yet.
No, it is ever.
But now that I have Jennifer by my side, she and I are working to make sure that, she and I can work on processes that will flow better. Because that's one of the issues that right now with ADP, there's not really good workflows that are incorporated within the system to make sure there's a proper handoff from one department to the other. So she and I are going to work on a plan on making sure that we have better handoff of data going from one department to the next.
Thank you. Appreciate all the work. I've seen you do it over these years. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And then can I just jump in on one piece, because I think there's another piece that I want to both give Helene and her team credit for and just acknowledge the amount of work that it takes, which is there's the front end, which is paying staff and making sure that staff are compensated, right, and that they receive their pay. And then there's the back end, which is about making sure that it reconciles to our accounting software, right? And Helene's team does a Herculean effort to make sure that there is an accounting of our payroll to the general ledger on the back end. And I would say that is still a piece that is a fair amount of work, right? And part of that may be the first 6 months, part of that may be a transition to the new fiscal year. But that is still a piece that I think is a large burden that sits on the financial team. And one that we need to figure out how in the future is more seamless so that it is not taking up the amount of time that it does on Helene and her team, and is one of the challenges of ADP.
Yep, that makes sense. I will quickly just echo, there's so much gratitude. Very much appreciated all the efforts. And I see that Board Chair Lentz has her hand up. I see that we have 9 minutes left and we have one more topic, but Board Chair Lentz, go ahead if you have a question.
Yeah, I think I hear from people in the community still asking, like why it's not all fixed yet. And so I just really appreciate Dr. Scallon and Helene, you speaking to kind of like the depth of these issues and how kind of like, it's almost like when you get in there and you turn the rock over, it's like, oh, this is the problem. And it just becomes so much bigger. And so I just want to, say out loud that like, that is why, and this is like grueling work. I don't know if anybody listening to this or is in this call, but like when you walk into a situation where you have to really analyze thousands of pieces of data that are connected to people's livelihood, like that is a high pressure situation that is monotonous and grueling and so I want to make sure that people listening at home like understand like how big this problem is, how much we're working on it, and how much we are committed to making sure that moving forward, we're in a very different place operationally and systemically. And I hear that happening in finance. I hear that happening in HR. I hear that happening in, everything that Dr. Scallon is doing also. And so I just want to reiterate that that is why this is taking so long, is because we are being so careful and thorough and exact about this so that we really do have that foundation moving forward. And just again, Helene, like, I don't think you knew when you came into this what you were coming into, and the fact that you're still here and in this gruel every day, I'm just incredibly grateful to you and your whole team. So thank you for that.
We're here.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that you said that, because you're absolutely right I don't mean to take up any more time, but it is a very scary thing, because we are reviewing people's livelihood that has affect them and will affect them moving forward as well. So we try to take our time in making sure we're making the right call when we're reviewing a file and trying to determine and understand what happened, because our records may not always give us the right answers when we're looking for that. And so we collectively try to make some assumptions in favor, always looking forward what's, to the benefit of the employee, on the decisions that we make on how we're going to rectify the corrections that we do end up looking at.
Okay. Again, much gratitude. And we have 6 minutes left to talk about what's ahead for our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, so just the last piece was just trying to get prioritization for the coming months. As you know, the commitment was to each finance committee is to still go over monthly financials and monthly vacancies. And then we brought here, this is something we reviewed with the Chair Bryden as to some of the topics potentially that we could look at and tackle. And so we wanted to bring this forward to see as a committee what the thought was.
Yes, much appreciated. And so just to sort of summarize the overall approach here, there are a number of topics that do have to be tackled at certain times of the year. The budget, namely, is a great example. It's always budget season, but March and April do get swallowed up with budget content pretty quickly. And so there's plenty to talk about all year long, obviously. But I feel like this is a really good overview of, what to expect in each month's meeting for the year ahead. May is very exciting and blank as of yet. So I think that we can, as a committee, think about whether the topics listed here are appropriate, and whether we all agree that this is sort of the what we want to be looking at over the course of the year, and if there's something that's missing, in terms of a topic that you really, really want to see the committee tackle, what might go in the May spot, for example? Initial thoughts, gut reactions.
Looks good, in that you've got things where they have to be. I'm looking forward to the strategic initiatives in September, and seeing how things are going to head that way. What I brought up a little before, my enthusiasm piece, is the fact that in some of the other strategic initiatives, in the section 2, particularly might be, and 3, would impact finance. And so I guess my thought is, I don't know how to do it with doing a crosswalk with the different groups. So as you know, whether it's with, I know policy is going to end up having a lot of interaction with the academic teams. So, and we can't do that in finance. So I guess that's something in the back. I don't know. May is a long time to talk about that, because some of those things would be impacting on the budget for the following year. So how do we deal with that?
Yeah, I do think, I mean, everything's a web in terms of, you know, content and everything, and sort of relates to everything else in some way or other. To sort of get at that part of what you were talking about, I'm curious, Dr. Scallon or any other staff that might have an opinion about this, I'm curious how far in advance you would need us to bring to you, hey, we'd like to talk about this in May, or, you know, or if there's another time of year where committee members feel strongly about discussing a particular topic, how much lead time would be effective for you folks?
So a couple thoughts come to mind. First, I think we can do more than one topic in a meeting. And so these are placeholders of where we think that they're going to be dominated, and March and April is the one spot where I think I would just leave it as budget. Just recognizing the flow of things. And so for me, it'd be more a question of what's the arc. Right? And so I'd rather hit a couple of topics and go deep and see them flow over the course of a year than a one-time piece. Because then I think we could really see progress over the year. And so I think if you were saying to me in September, we'd love to see this in October and then again in March, that would feel like a great cadence. Versus a couple weeks out. So that way we can really make sure that it's aligned to the strategic, like the way I think of it is like, what's aligned to the strategic plan, what is really a priority for department, and what allows us to drive the work. And so, you know, 5.3, I think in this department is really getting at the long-term financial. And so thinking about what's the overall plan. Jennifer and her work, well, it's not named in the strategic plan, is really thinking about what is she learning and what are the SOPs. And so she is building a plan for the year. And so even getting updates on that throughout the year, kind of thing that I think would be good.
And rather than put committee members on the spot right in this moment, what else do you want to talk about? I am thinking that it makes more sense to finalize, as you said, the arc of topics over the course of the year in our September meeting. Does anybody have strong negative feelings about that approach? Okay, wonderful. So yes, so do you think about what else is not on here that you might want to tackle? Let me know, and we will finalize this slide with updates in September. Thank you so. Oh yes. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate your patience. We're 1 minute over. I appreciate all your engagement. Really, really good updates. Well, really good, solid information today, and I so appreciate all of you. Our next meeting will be in September, and it will start at 6:00 p.m. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I hope you all have a lovely evening. I will actually look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wonderful. And a second from Board Member Noor. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.